Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest Spark Sessions webinar, our monthly webinars where we do dives into how agencies are really using AI. I'm Jules Love. I'm one of the founders of Spark AI, and we're going to take you through what agents really are, how agencies are using them. We're going to show a few because it's always great to actually see these things for real rather than just talk about them. And then we'll talk about how you can start using these yourselves. So let's get some slides up on the screen. Thanks, Asta. Great. So agents for agencies. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about Spark. So I'm one of the co-founders of Spark. We specifically work with agencies to help you build AI into the way that you work. Through training, we have role-specific programs for different teams, client services, strategy, creative, media planning. We do agency transformation, working with leadership teams to help them work out what this technology means for them and how to build an AI program within your business. And we help with tools. And obviously that's going to be a little bit about what we're talking about today, helping you scope and deliver AI forward tools to your teams to either improve the productivity of your team or create new offerings for your clients. We've worked with over 80 agencies in the UK and internationally. Some of you might have read my book, Shift AI for Agencies, that's now sold over 5,000 copies. Our leadership program, I teach at Oxford University Business School, and our coaches are all ex-agencies, so really bring real hands-on knowledge of what it takes to deliver high-quality client work to everything that we do. So, agents. Agents is definitely the sort of buzzword at the moment, and you can't go onto LinkedIn without somebody bragging that they now have agents running their business and they just kick back, drink pina coladas, and reply to a couple of emails, and they're running the whole business off their phone. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, I'm so far behind. There's no way I can compete with these kind of people. It all sounds terribly complicated. But what's really going on? The truth is, nobody's really running their business that way, or nobody who has a real business anyway. What agents really are is they're still very useful, but they're pretty narrowly defined. They're tasks that are still very human-led, and you're still in control. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. Some of you might have come across the news from OpenAI and Anthropic over the last couple of weeks, where they've had autonomous agents escape their sandbox environments and hack into companies. Even on a small scale, that can happen. The reason why you don't want truly autonomous agents running in your business, here's a slightly more down-to-earth example. Some of you might have heard of OpenClaw, an agentic platform that was released back at the beginning of the year or end of last year. The head of AI at an Australian company used OpenClaw to try and book his gym appointments. And autonomous agents relentlessly goal seek. So what did it do? It managed to find a 0-day cyber vulnerability in the gym booking software, managed to book him gym classes going 2 years ahead, even though normally you could only book 2 months ahead. And then for gym classes that were already overbooked, it knocked other people off the wait list and stuck him at the top. And he actually had to phone up the gym, apologize about what had happened, and try and put it all back to normal. So there's a very good reason why you don't want fully autonomous agents running your business. They will make decisions that are not the same as the decisions you would have made. So get all of that hype off the table. That's not what you're going to be doing in your company. It's not what you want your team to be doing. And we're a long way from having autonomous agents that are safe and aligned to the way that humans actually want to work. So what are the building blocks of AI in your organization, and where do agents fit in? Well, first of all, we all started out by prompting, right? We're in a chat interface, we're typing a bunch of instructions, trying to get an output that's useful to move us forwards. And the next step beyond that might be to have prompt libraries where you store useful prompts and share them with your team. Perhaps you've got a prompt that's great for researching customer sentiment about particular products. And with just a bit of tweaking, you can use it again and again. And that's kind of where we all started. And some of you might still be mostly there today, and that's fine too. But the next step on from that is starting to work in a shared way across your team. So you might use projects, if you're in ChatGPT or Claude, for example, where you've got shared context where multiple people on a team are working out of the same project. And so you've got a single source of truth. You might set up a project for each client, for example. It would be a great way to work. And then getting a little bit more sophisticated, we have what at Spark we call AI assistants. But these are, you might know them as custom GPTs, Gemini gems, Copilot agents. These are essentially specially programmed aspects of ChatGPT or Copilot that are optimized for a particular task to help you complete a particular type of document or to help you conduct a particular type of analysis. And assistants are super, super useful, but they're essentially still tied within your chat environment. So the final building block, or at least today, the final building block is agents. So these are where we've got tools that are able to connect to other systems. They're able to create outputs outside of the chat that are genuinely useful. They're able to run on a schedule or some kind of trigger, and they're taking AI assistants to the next level where they can be genuinely time-saving and often strategically useful. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what's the difference between an AI assistant and an AI agent? Well, when you build an assistant, if you build a custom GPT, for example, or a Gemini gem, or a Copilot agent, confusingly, Copilot calls these things agents, even when they're not agentic. It has three components to it. It has instructions. Think of this as like the brain. What is it you're actually asking it to do? It'll have knowledge. Sometimes you'll have to give it some documents so it understands what your world looks like. You might give it a template to show it what a statement of work in your organization actually looks like, or an example of a good proposal so that it knows what that is. Then standards, where you need to be able to show it what a good output looks like. What does good look like for you? And that might be examples where you give it some good examples and bad examples of outputs, or it might be a written thing where you say, for me, I want the output to be a summary paragraph and 5 bullet points, or I want comprehensive detailed review broken into these 5 sections. So what turns something like that into an agent? Well, what makes it an agent is when you add 3 more things to it. Firstly, a trigger. What starts the workflow? So it doesn't have to be started by a human. Secondly, connectors. It can reach outside of your chat and reach into other systems to get data, and also to update data. And finally, where does the output go? The output isn't just something in the chat window. The output is a tangible thing, an email, a status update, a draft document, whatever it might be. So that's how we get from assistants to agents. So I'm going to dive in a little bit into each of those 6 components. So what instructions are, what do you want it to do? And Andre Karpathy, one of the founders of OpenAI, had a great phrase, English is the new programming language. And this is really where you're essentially writing code for how it should behave, but you can use just plain language for encoding that. You just have to spell out logically what you want it to do, or the goal that you have in mind for it. You can use it to retrieve things. You can use it to synthesize information. You can use it to triage, to help you prioritize things. You can use it to draft documents. You can use it to check stuff and validate whether something is the same as something else or not. You can use it to update things. and you can use it to notify you when something happens. So there's lots of different ways that you can give it instructions to help you actually achieve something. And we'll look at some of these in a minute. And you can combine some of these things as well. Knowledge. So the way to think about knowledge is, what information does it need to know to do its job? And the way I like to think about this is, if you had an intern join your business on their first day, what would they need to read to be able to understand what you were asking of them? So with large language models, obviously they all have information to public knowledge. Anything that's available on the internet, they've been trained on, as in they kind of know it already, or they can go and look it up if you give them web access. So how to do a lot of common tasks, they kind of know. But what they don't know is how to do it exactly the way you do it. They know how to write a statement of work. What they don't know is how to write a statement of work for your agency. So that's where agency knowledge comes in. This is where you might give it templates, SOPs, your particular methodologies, your case studies, things that allow it to turn generic outputs into things that are specific to your team and the way they work. And then finally, you might need to give it access to client knowledge. So these might be things where it actually understands the project you're working on right now. So that might be briefs, it might be brand guidelines, it might be the stakeholders that you're interacting with. What's the knowledge it's going to need to be able to tailor its output to the client that you're actually working for? So that's the kind of knowledge you're going to need to give it access to. And then the third thing is standards. What does the output actually look like? What is good for you? So often, as you can see on the left, if you ask 5 different people what a good status report looks like, you'll get 5 slightly different answers. And for agents, if you want the output to be consistent, you've got to tell it how to do it one way. What are the sections of the output and what order do they go in? What tone of voice do you want it to, or audience is it creating the output for? What's really helpful is to show it a good example and tell it why that's good, and a bad example and tell it why that is bad. We often talk about show, don't tell. These tools are very, very good at working out the difference between things in ways that are much more complex than you would think to describe. So often showing these things is a better way to get your standards encoded in there. Trigger. So what's going to set it off? So just like a typical assistant, like a custom GPT or a Gemini Gem, you can just start it off yourself. You can just ask it when you need it. But the differentiator with agents is they can run in other ways too. They can be triggered on a schedule. So you could run something every morning at 7 a.m. or every quarter or the last day of the month, whatever it might be. They can be triggered by an event, when an email arrives in your inbox, or a status changes on your project management software, or something like that. They can be triggered by a form or a file. So you can have a watched folder, for example, and when a document arrives in the folder, it performs an action. And when you start getting complicated, you can even have agents that are triggered by other agents. As we said at the beginning, agents are often quite specialist and narrow in their scope. So you will sometimes, for more complex workflows, you can string multiple agents together where one hands off to the other. So there's lots of different ways that you can trigger these things. But the main differentiator of an agent is it's more than you just asking for it. So you can start to use them in a semi-autonomous way. Next, we've got connectors. So what will it need to access to do its job? And most of us have probably already got, if you're working with ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Claude, you've probably already hooked it up to your Google Drive or your OneDrive or your SharePoint. So it's already got access to your cloud storage. But what other things can you give these tools access to? Well, more and more commonly now, it's easy to hook them up to your project management tool, for example. Or if you've got a meeting note taker, to hook it up to your Fireflies or your Gemini notes. You can hook it up to your finance system or to your CRM, so it can understand much more about what's really going on in your business and what the actual events taking place with a particular client or in a particular team or in a particular project actually are. And this is where you face your first decision, big decision, when you start to work with agents, which is, what permissions are you prepared to give it? So I highly recommend that you start very conservative and slowly build from there. As you understand more about what these agents can do, you understand more about what they do wrong. And that is really what we're mitigating against here. Are you happy for it to read from that source? You probably are, otherwise why are you connecting it up? But are you happy for it to write to that source? Do you want an agent actually writing something into your project management system, into your finance system, into your CRM? Maybe, maybe not. Or maybe it depends on the kind of task that you're asking it to do. And do you allow it to do that once, where perhaps the user has to approve it each time? Or are you going to give it a blanket permission to do that whenever it feels it should? Again, I highly recommend you start conservative and only start going to always allow once it's things that are either very easy to roll back or very low risk. Outputs. So what outputs are you asking it to create? So as I mentioned, the distinguishing feature of an agent, one of the distinguishing features of an agent as opposed to an assistant, is it can create something outside of the chat. So are you getting it to draft an email that then sits there ready to review and tweak and send? Does it put a message into Slack or Google Chat? Does it write a document and stick it in a folder? Does it add a row to a spreadsheet? Does it update the status in a system, for example? These are the different kinds of things that you can get an agent to do. And as you'll see on the right-hand side, the further you go down that list, kind of the higher risk the activity kind of is. So again, start small, test these things, understand what works, and generally don't apply agents to do things that are hard to roll back. If it changes the status of something in your project management system and you realize it's wrong, do you know what the status was before? Is it easy to roll it back? That's why you need to be careful about write permissions in particular. So these things exist in any platform. Everybody is innovating in this space and trying to roll them out. So for those of you that are in a Google and Gemini world, then this is the kind of thing that you can build in Workspace Studio, and we're going to look at that in a moment. If you're in ChatGPT, these things are called workspace agents and were released back in April time or so. And we're going to go and take a look at a couple of those. If you're in Claude, then to build proper agents, you're probably looking at using Claude Code to create things, but that can be a little more intimidating. But the easiest way in Claude is to create scheduled tasks. So we're going to take a look at a few of those. And finally, if you're on Copilot, you can build these things in Agent Studio. And Copilot Studio, it's called. It doesn't have the word agent in it. But confusingly, in Copilot, a regular assistant is called an agent, even if it never leaves the chat. But in Copilot Studio, you can add things like triggers, connectors, and others that turn it into a proper agent. So you've all almost certainly got access to these things. So what are some of the things that you can use them for? And I'm going to show a few in a moment. So these are just some examples. So for your business development team, it can run through your CRM, highlight which deals are hot, which ones need contacting today to nudge them forwards, and draft the message that you send out for you to review. You can use them to monitor competitors or clients and collect them into a weekly digest that gets sent to your inbox, for example, so you can stay ahead of what's going on out there. If you're in the marketing world, that's great for competitor analysis. If you're an account manager, it's great for client news. What's your client up to? How can you make your conversations more relevant to what they're really doing? What if you are in a strategy or planning team? You can use these tools to start to kick off the research for you when a brief comes in. You could use these tools to review your timesheets if you're in an operational role and see who's completed them and who's not, or flag timesheets that look like they're inaccurate. And you could, obviously, you can have these things summarize meetings. I'm sure lots of you are using meeting note takers these days, but you can automatically have the contact report added to your CRM and then an action item added to your project management tool, for example. So you can start to get, everybody has talked about the dream for AI is to have it do the laundry and dishes so that we can create art and make poetry. Well, this is where AI actually starts to be able to do some of the boring operational stuff in your job so that you can focus on the stuff that's higher value, more interesting, and requires more human thought and judgment to actually do it well. So let's take a look at what some of these things actually look like. So here we are. So first of all, I'm gonna start off in Claude. Then we're going to take a look at ChatGPT. Then we're going to take a look at Gemini. I'm not going to dive into Copilot today, simply because I don't have much to demo in Copilot. We have clients that use Copilot, but we don't use it internally at Spark, and our data's in Google, not on Microsoft. So I've got much more to show you on the other three, but rest assured that you can do very similar things in Copilot too. So here's a few things that I have set up as scheduled tasks in Claude. You can see that I've got a chief of staff agent. So this is one that kind of helps me organize my day. I've got a daily commitment sweep. That's Claude's name for it. But this is something that just helps me make sure I haven't missed any actions and that I'm staying on top of things. And then this is a competitor watch that you can see runs every Tuesday. That once a week just scans what's going on out there and lets me know if there's anything I need to be aware of. So let's take a look at what these things actually look like. So here we go. Here's my Thursday brief. So this is the chief of staff agent, and it produces a web page. I've got it to anonymize this one so that I can share it on the screen. So all the client names have been replaced by XXX. But you can see it's telling me I'm live on a webinar at 2 o'clock and that I had a board meeting today, both of which are true. And it gives me a little rhythm for my day, but the real stuff becomes what's my focus. It's given me 3 sort of business development things that I need to move on. We're developing a lot of new products at Spark, so it's telling me what the next activity I need to do on each of our products are. Here it's telling me about deals and what needs to be going on in those deals. It's giving me general stuff that needs my attention. So this is looking at my email, it's looking at my call transcripts, it's looking at our Monday project management system and CRM system. And so it's pulling out things that I'm probably going to need to pay attention to. Some things that I'm waiting for and that I've given out to other people and I'm waiting to come back that I might want to chase up. And then it gives me just a highlight of some of the important meetings I've got today. So here we are on our Agents in Agencies live webinar. So I get that every morning. It's an HTML web page. It's static, but it's a very helpful way for me to just understand, get my day off to a good start. The other thing we've got here is this daily commitment sweep. So what this guy does is, if you're anything like me, you're involved in hundreds of email threads and jumping on and off calls all day. And it can be, whilst we all still have a trusty notebook, it can be hard to keep track of everything that you've committed to do or all of the actions that have fallen on your plate. So this just does a bit of a sweep and it goes out, it looks in my call transcripts. It runs at midday every day. It looks in my call transcripts, my Gmail, and helps identify anything that I've committed to that I've not done. It also looks at Monday to see does the task already exist. And if it doesn't, it goes and sticks it on a Monday board. So it puts them in this auto-captured section on the Monday board so that I can tell these were AI generated so that I can just review them before I add them as a proper to-do for me. So that's one where I've given it write permission, but it writes into an area that I can see and I know that these are AI generated. So I get to double check them before I do anything with them. The final one that I'm going to show you in Claude is our competitor watch. So this runs once a week, and this is an agent that builds on itself. So obviously, when you run something like this, most competitors don't change every week. They just change occasionally, or what their activity changes occasionally. So what this does is it produces a Google Doc in a particular folder for me, for our team, but you can see when it runs each week, it builds on what's new. It talks about what's changing, rather than giving me a whole new report each time, where most of the time it's going to be repeating itself. So each time it builds on what's changed, and crucially, it gives me a bit of a so what. It tells me what are some of the things it thinks I should do. So it helps kind of turn knowledge into a bit of momentum, a bit of action. So that just builds up week by week. Okay, let's jump over to ChatGPT. So for those of you that in the world of chat, you can see workspace agents are now their own little place in the sidebar. You can browse some agents, some pre-built agents that ChatGPT, OpenAI have created for you, and there's various templates that you can use. Or you can build your own. And here's one here. Here's a deal coach that we've got. It can prioritize and recommend the best actions for deals. So this plugs into our CRM in this case, and our Gmail. So it can review deals, it can draft follow-up emails, it can help you prepare for calls. So I've got it, I got it to run one on anonymized client data. Here we go, 55 minutes ago to get ready for this webinar. I got it to create an anonymized report, just so I can show you the kind of thing that it does. So this is pulling, so you can see it took 4 minutes and 16 seconds to trawl through our CRM, look at all of the opportunities that are tagged against my name, and think about what is the most high priority next step for me to do and why. So here we go. So it steps through some different things. So what stage is the deal and the value? Why am I working on it now? The evidence that it's brought on that, when I need to do something, and then it's drafted the email for me. So, and it actually creates that draft in my Gmail too. So I can read that, tweak it a little bit, and send it off. So you can see it does that for several deals that have got my name against them in our CRM. So super helpful for keeping on top of stuff. A CRM obviously can give you gives you a great view of the status of every deal, but it sometimes you need a bit of help to turn that into what's the action I'm actually going to take. Great, so we've focused a lot on sort of just managing your own productivity, managing your own time. What I'm going to talk about now is, what about using these things for helping with client work? And that's where, for this particular one, I'm going to show what goes on in Gemini and Gemini Workspace Studio. So those of you that are in Gemini, I'm sure you've built gems. So here's a bunch of gems that we have. Lots and lots of them, as you can see. Hopefully you've got lots as well. And so gems are like assistants. So these stay in the chat. They're not connected to anything. They don't have triggers, and they can't produce an output outside of the chat. But you can see here, a lot of strategy teams have some variation of what we call the 4 C's framework for when they do research it at the start of a project. They search the company, so who the client is and understanding more about the company. They do competitor research, who else is in that field. They do cultural research, especially if you're working with a consumer brand, like how is this idea or concept or product or service being talked about? And they do customer research. So, who is the audience for this product or service, and how are they thinking, and what are their buying preferences? So here you can see we've got the 4 gems, and they're great, but you can only use them one by one. You can't, and the answers only come out in the chat. So imagine that you could build a workflow around that. And here is that workflow. So we're in Google Workflow Studio and Workspace Studio, sorry. And if you're in a Google environment, there it is. It's that sort of double arrow icon there. And when you jump into Studio, it looks a bit like this: automate your work with Gemini. There's some really simple things you can just, if you're in a Google environment, they have some built-in things that you can just turn on, no-brainers, like get a daily summary of my unread emails, or notify me of certain messages or things like that. So there's a bunch of pre-built ones, most of which are quite handy. So I highly recommend you turn some of those on. But you can also build your own. So if we go into flows, here we go. I'm going to go to my brief research agent that we're going to show. So what does this brief research agent do? Well, what it does is, first of all, it watches a folder. So I've created a folder called Research Inbox. And if I drop a brief into the research inbox, it will trigger this workflow. So this is the trigger. And then it performs some actions. The first thing it does is it picks up the link to the document in the folder, and it automatically extracts what the key questions to answer are, the client name, and it also extracts the full text of the brief. And what does it do? It then passes that on to those 4 gems that we saw. So these next 4 steps are ask a gem. The first one asks the company research gem, and it passes it a prompt that says research this brief, and gives the brief that was extracted in the previous step for this company, and it gives the client name that was extracted in the previous step. And all the other instructions sit within the gem. So that's the company research. We do exactly the same thing for competitor research, exactly the same thing for culture research, and exactly the same thing for customer research. And then the final step then is to get this stuff out of the chat and into something that's actually usable. So the final step is to create a Google Doc. So it gives it the title, client name, research brief document, and then it puts the output of the gems in sequence into the document and saves it to a folder. In this case, we've got a research output folder where it saves the output. So what does that actually look like for real? Imagine you had received a brief. So imagine Nike want to launch a ski boot. I had a bit of fun making this up. So Nike want to turn their brilliant athletic credentials into a sport they haven't done before that already has a lot of traditional suppliers. So they've given us a bit of detail about what they're trying to do, who their target audience is, and some deliverables. And if you put it through the workflow that I just showed you, what do you get? Well, you get a document, a Nike brief research document. And here you can see we've got the 4 sections: customer research, category, culture, and company. You can dive into each of these. So each of these gives us about 2 or 3 pages of material. So here we go: category research, what's going on in the category, looking at competitor breakdown. So all of the stuff that, this won't be the only research that you do, but it's a great primer for your team. Cultural research, what's going on in the world around this sort of stuff. How's it changed from 5 years ago to today? You can see all of this stuff is pretty useful primer for the team that are getting started on this project. And that automatically appears in your outbox. An agent like this probably takes about 15 minutes to run, because obviously it's got to go and compile all of this information. But it does it basically automatically. You just kick it off by saving the brief into a folder. So you can start to imagine how across your team, you can find all sorts of opportunities for these kinds of workflows to either improve your personal productivity, so to stay on top of what tasks you've got to do that day, or your client productivity, which is, what is some of the stuff I need to do to deliver this project, and how can AI help me get there? So I hope that's been interesting to have a little look into what some of these agents really look like, and the kind of thing that's very straightforward to create. But when you start working this way, it is a very different kind of working. The number one thing you need to impress on your teams when you start to deploy agents is people still need to keep their brains switched on. Just because you've got the research document, is it actually answering all the questions that you really need to understand? Just because ChatGPT has told you these are the 5 most important things for you to work on that day, are they really? Like, you still might know, actually, I need to be leaning into this today because I know it's more urgent right now. So keep your brain switched on and getting your team to understand to keep their brain switched on. Humans suffer from something known as automation bias. We tend to trust the outputs of computers more than we trust the output of humans. And when it comes to generative AI, that's often not the right decision. The other thing is, when these tools start creating things, they can often be very long, and they tend to be fairly wordy by default. And if all you're doing is passing big, long documents off to other people in your team, you might be saving loads of time, but actually you're just dumping all of that time on your teammate instead, who now has to read 10 pages when they could have just read 2 if you'd written it yourself. So definitely use this stuff responsibly. And how do you manage the risk around these things? We talked about, autonomous agents hacking into gym software at the beginning of this talk. How can you, what is the risk of the task you're actually using it for? If you're using an agent to generate ideas for a brainstorm with your team, then, the bar for accuracy is fairly low because you're going to weed them out yourself. But if you are asking it to draft emails, do not send them. Make sure somebody who understands that project reads it and modifies it before they send it, because it's never going to be perfect. If you're committing to pricing or scoping a project or anything that commits you contractually, somebody has to read it. You cannot blame the agent if it gets something wrong. You have to blame the human that sent it. Anything you publish to a live channel, anything that makes a big strategic leap or creative leap in your project, like is the evidence real? You've got to go and you have to own it. You can't blame the agent. So I think all of these things are where, you've still got to have people in the loop. I'm afraid lying on the beach drinking pina coladas and running your business from your phone is still a few years off. And I think something really important here is, often when we talk to clients about the opportunities these things create, the first problem they want to point an agent at is the most valuable thing in their business. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. 1, because the agent probably won't be good enough. And 2, because you're then automating away the very value that you bring to your client. So I think a great example of how to think about deploying agents in your business comes from a copywriting agency that we know. And they work with a lot of corporate clients on retainers. So they know their clients quite well. And they're often doing, they'll write hundreds of pieces, everything from social media content to blog posts to thought leadership to website copy. And what have they done to build agents into the way that they work? The number one rule they have is all copy is still written by a human. But what they've done is they've pointed agents at everything else. So when a brief arrives, an agent interrogates the brief against their briefing template and examples of good briefs they've received previously. It comes up with all the gaps and the questions to fill those gaps, and it automatically emails the client back and saying, thanks for your brief. Could you please give us a bit more information around this, this, and this? And it will continue to do that until the brief is complete and it has enough detail for the agency to be able to commission the work. When the work gets commissioned, it has a research agent, a little bit like the one I showed you. There's one that goes off and does external research, what do we need to know from out in the world? And there's another one that has access to their client data repository that can understand internal stuff about the client that it might need to write about, information about their particular products and services or whatever it might be. So by the time the copywriter gets involved, they receive a comprehensive brief and a great research packet that gets them started. So they get to focus on the bit of the job, A, that they're best at, writing, and B, that they enjoy the most. So they get to spend most of their time actually writing, rather than clarifying briefs, conducting research, and all waiting for clients to come back to them. And when they've completed their work, their first round of review comes from an agent as well that critiques their piece of work against examples of previous work that's been signed off and client guidelines and the brief itself, of course. And it gives them that first round of feedback. And as the writer, they get to decide if they think the feedback is appropriate or not. They get to choose whether they update their copy as a result, but they're not waiting a day or two to get any feedback on what they're doing. That first round of feedback comes in 5 minutes. As a result, they're getting 95% sign off of their copy first time around. So don't point agents at the thing your client's really paying for. Point them at everything else that frees up your people to do the valuable thing better. Now, if that all sounded interesting, then Spark helps companies do exactly this kind of work. We can work alongside you to build agents in your team. So over the space of 2 days, we usually spread them a week apart. We can help you build working agents and give your team the skills to identify and build more of them. We help you identify what's appropriate work for agents in your workflow, help you scope the agent out, help you build and use AI to help you build the agent, evaluate it. We then leave you for a week to actually use it, so you find out what's really working and what's not. We come back, we help you refine it, we'll help you quantify the benefit that it delivers, whether it's speed, quality, or consistency. We help you use AI to document the agent so other people can manage it, and we help you understand how to govern these things in your business so that you've got control over how they're being used. So if that sounds interesting, then please do get in touch. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. If you could stop the screen share, Asta. Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope that's been interesting. Agents really are real these days. They are genuinely useful. They're not quite ready to run your business for you yet, but hopefully that's given you some confidence to go out and see what you can do yourself. Thanks for listening.